Welcome to Hearts of Scripture, where ancient words come alive, where every story of the Bible touches the heart and awakens the soul. This is the story told through the eyes of Dante Alighieri, the one who once walked through the depths of the soul and saw the light of heaven within the darkness of humanity. Today, I invite you to walk with me through that journey once more, not to hear another sermon, but to live again the pilgrimage of faith, of doubt, and of rebirth. I do not speak from memory, but from the witness of one who has walked, who has fallen, and who has been lifted up. Every word I speak is the ashes of doubt and the fire of grace. This is not only an ancient story, it is the story of every soul still wrestling between light and shadow, between the cry of the heart and the silence of God. Listen not only with your ears, but with your soul. There is something strange in human nature, that when the storm descends, we call everyone except the one who can calm the sea. I was once like that, standing in the cold wind of prayer, while my heart remained closed. I told God that I needed change, but what I truly wanted was for Him to change everything in the way I desired. I did not ask for light. I only wanted it to shine where I wished. I spoke of faith, yet I carried in my heart a contract already written. Now I see that it was the most dangerous kind of prayer, not because it was bold, but because it was spoken in pride. People do not really want to be transformed. They only want everything around them to be transformed. And when God is silent, they think He does not hear. But God does not work according to the will of those who still hold the throne within their own hearts. He is the one who writes history, and I am only a small character upon His page. When I prayed, I realized that I was not truly seeking His will. I only wanted Him to sign mine. Through the long nights of pleading, I did not know that this hunger for control had turned prayer into a chain. I once believed that faith meant persistence until the answer came. But true faith does not beg to be right. It kneels to be wrong. One night, on a hill wet with dew, I looked up to the sky and asked myself, do I truly want to follow God? Or do I only want Him to follow my path? The question did not echo outward, but fell deep into my heart. I began to see that the real battle of the soul is not the fight to change circumstances, but the fight to reclaim the leadership of the heart. People always want God to act, but only within the boundaries they allow. They speak of faith, yet their faith is conditional. They speak of surrender, yet they still hold tightly to the outcome. They call upon His name, but when He is silent, they doubt His goodness. Then I understood that God did not come to complete my plan. He came to end it. And only when I let my intentions fall apart could He begin to rewrite them with grace. I remembered the words in the Psalms that He knows every path before I walk it. And I understood that if He is the one who leads, then even the way He lets me lose my way is part of the journey home. From that moment on, I no longer prayed for God to open the way according to my desire. I prayed for Him to teach me to stop, because faith does not begin with action. It begins with release. When I stopped telling Him what to do, He began to tell me who to become. In that moment, I no longer needed answers. I only needed His presence. And I knew that true change does not come when God makes everything different, but when I no longer needed to be different. I prayed for change, and God answered with silence. But in that silence, I redirected my soul. And that was when the true journey began. Have you ever felt like you were standing before a door that refused to open even after you had prayed, waited, and believed with all your heart? Have you ever wondered if God was truly silent, or if He was waiting for something from you? I want to invite you to pause for a moment, take a deep breath, and think about that moment in your life, the moment you kept knocking on a door that never opened. Share that story in the comments below, so I may know that you are walking this journey with me, that I am not speaking alone, that among countless souls out there, you too are listening I am truly grateful for your presence, because everything I share only finds its meaning when it touches your heart and brings a little peace to you and your family. There was a man I once knew who prayed for God to open a new door for him. He served, he fasted, he gave, but every door remained closed. One day, weary and heavy-hearted, he looked up and said, Lord, why have you not made a way for me? And in the quiet of his soul, a gentle answer came, because you still want to choose the hallway. I thought about that answer for a long time, because it felt like a mirror reflecting my own heart. Are we truly waiting for God, or are we waiting for him to do things our way? Sometimes we do not wait in faith. We wait in control. We ask God to open a door, but then we tell him which door, which direction, and when it should happen. And when things do not go as we expect, we begin to doubt, to complain, and to wander in the disappointment we built ourselves. I have stood at that threshold before. I have prayed with sincerity, yet my heart was full of calculation. I wanted God to move, but only within the limits I allowed. I called it faith, but it was only fear in disguise. I was afraid to let go because I was afraid to lose control. But God does not lead with a map. He leads with faith. He never promised that the road would be easy. He only promised that he would walk with us. I realized that many times what I call waiting for God was actually God waiting for me to learn to trust. To see meaning in a closed door. Perhaps he has not opened the way because I am still too busy choosing the direction. Perhaps he has not answered because I have not truly listened. Perhaps he has not changed the situation because he is still changing me. God's waiting is never empty silence. It is an invitation to enter a deeper layer of faith. I once heard someone say, when God slows down, it means he is writing a longer story. And I believe that because in that silence, I learned to live slower, to trust more, and to be more grateful. If you are in a season of waiting, if you are praying for a door to open and all you see is a wall, please know that God is still working. Perhaps he is teaching you the most important lesson: to trust without seeing, to hope without certainty. Do not be quick to conclude that he is silent, because it is within that silence that he shapes your heart to resemble his. Every time I look back, I see that the doors God did not open were the ones that saved me from myself. If he had allowed me to walk through what I once begged for, I might have lost something far greater: his presence. Now I no longer ask for a door to open. I only ask God to teach me to stand firm before the doors that remain closed. I ask him to teach me not to fear delay, not to resent silence, not to despair when things do not go my way. Because I know that when he closes one path, he is opening a way back to himself, and perhaps that is the only hallway I ever need to walk through. If you are in that season of waiting, I want you to remember that sometimes what you call delay is actually protection. What you think is silence may be the soft whisper of God saying, my child, wait a little longer. God is never late. We are simply early. Share your thoughts in the comments below about the door you are waiting to be opened, or about the moment you realized that God's delay was really his protection. I want to hear your story, because it is through your sharing that these words become not just mine, but ours. Thank you for listening, for being here, and for allowing me to walk beside you on this journey of faith. May the peace of God touch your soul and fill your home, so that even if the door before you remains closed, your heart will stay open to the peace that no one can take away. There are days when I sit quietly in the middle of a noisy city, where the sounds of life collide like a river that never sleeps. The voices, the engines, the worries all blend into a chaotic song in which the soul can no longer find its rhythm. I realized that what exhausts people is not only work or hardship, but the fact that the space within them has become too crowded to hear the voice of God. When the mind is filled with the noise of ambition, fear, and comparison, the whisper of God becomes distant. I once confused movement with life. I thought I was moving forward, but I was only running in circles, where every step made a sound but no meaning. I prayed a lot. I read scripture a lot, yet my heart was never still. I could not understand why others could say they heard the voice of God, while all I could hear was the echo of my own. Then one afternoon, as the last light of day leaned through the window, I came across a verse in the Gospel of John. My sheep hear my voice, not may hear, but hear. I paused for a long time, not to understand, but to feel. I realized that the voice of God had never been lost, only that I had forgotten how to listen. I had become accustomed to loud sounds, to hurried rhythms, to letting fear drive me. I demanded that God speak clearly, quickly, as if I were the one controlling the wind and the waves. But he does not speak in the storm. He speaks in the gentle breeze. He does not speak to a restless soul. He speaks to a soul ready to be still. I understood that to hear his voice, I must learn silence again. Not the silence outside, but the stillness within, where every need to prove or to control is released, when the soul stops arguing with itself, when the will stops trying to shout louder than grace. Then the whisper of God becomes clearer than ever. I remember a friend once asked me how to tell the difference between the voice of God and the voice of oneself. I said, his voice never push. It invites, it never frightens. It brings peace. It does not magnify the ego. It leads to humility. The voice of God does not cry out from the outside. It rises from the deepest place within, where only grace can reach. When our soul moves in his rhythm, everything begins to change. Not because the world outside is different, but because we are, all the noise is still there. But it no longer rules. All the worries still surround, but they no longer occupy the heart. Peace does not come when everything outside is quiet, but when there is no more resistance within. God does not silence the world. He teaches me to hear him amid the world. I think of Elijah when he fled into the wilderness. God did not appear in the strong wind, nor in the earthquake or the fire, but in the gentle whisper. I understood that it is in those fragile silences where there is nothing left to display, nothing left to prove, that God speaks, and sometimes a single whisper is enough to change the course of a life. I began to live slower, to turn down the unnecessary noise. Every morning, I spend a few minutes in silence, asking for nothing, saying nothing. Just being gradually, I began to see more clearly what had been hidden. I learned to hear the difference between worry and intuition, between the reaction of the ego and the guidance of the spirit. I realized that when the heart is at peace, we no longer have to chase the voice of God, for he is already there in every breath, every glance, every heartbeat. His voice is not always words. Sometimes it is a soft stirring, like a hand resting on your shoulder in the night. And I know that I am no longer lost. There is a sacred silence that surrounds those who listen. It does not pull us away from the world. It teaches us to see the world with new eyes. I began to see that God does not speak only in prayer. He speaks through life itself, in the words of a friend, in the sunlight on my hands, in the tears of the weary. I had searched for his voice as if it were far away, but he was always nearer than I thought. I only needed to be still enough to hear and humble enough to answer. Then I understood that faith is not the journey to find the voice of God. but the journey to clear the soul enough to hear the voice that has always been there. There was a time when I believed that walking with God required a clear map, that I needed to know every turn and every destination before I could begin. I prayed for him to show me the way, but what I truly wanted was a safe plan. I did not want the journey. I wanted the result. I wanted the certainty of man, not the trust of faith. And when God did not give me quick answers, I called it silence. But now I understand he was not silent. He was teaching me to walk by faith and not by sight. In those days, I often felt like I was standing at a crossroads, each path with its own logic, and I was afraid that one wrong step would cause me to lose the will of God. I was so afraid of being wrong that I did not move at all. I prayed, I fasted, I read his word, and yet I remained still. I called it waiting, but it was the paralysis of the soul. One day, as I complained that God had not told me where to go, he whispered into my heart, "I cannot lead one who refuses to move." That sentence silenced me. I realized I had demanded full light before being willing to step into the dark. But faith does not work that way. God does not give us a torch to illuminate the whole road. He gives us a candle bright enough for the next step. And if we do not walk, that candle will fade. I began to see that not all silence is delay. Sometimes it is an invitation. God did not want me to sit and wait for him to draw the map. He wanted me to believe that even without a map, I am still being led. He did not call me to know. He called me to trust. I remembered Abraham, who left his homeland not knowing where he was going, simply because he heard a voice. God did not tell him the destination. He only said, go. And he went, not because he knew the way, but because he trusted the one who leads. I began to live that way. I stopped asking for detailed directions, and I started asking for courage to take the next step. When an opportunity came, I no longer asked, is this the will of God? But rather, can I walk faithfully in this? When a door closed, in no longer despair, I reminded myself, if he holds the keys, then every closed door has a reason. I learned to walk through the fog, where there was no vision, only the whisper in my soul. And strangely, it was in that shadow that I felt his presence more clearly than ever. A friend once told me, faith is walking through the night while still believing the sun will rise. I once thought that was only a beautiful metaphor, until I had to live it myself. When I began walking without guarantees, I saw God everywhere, in the people I met, indoors unexpectedly opening, in the peace that made no sense. In the middle of anxiety, he did not give me all the answers, but he gave me enough faith to stop needing them, and that is true freedom. I once heard that you only hear the voice of your guide clearly when you walk close enough. Perhaps God keeps me in the dark, not to frighten me, but to draw me nearer, so I can hear his voice without distance. For if I saw the entire road, I might no longer hold his hand. I met a woman who told me she had prayed for months asking God which direction to take in her career. Yet no sign came. Eventually, she decided to walk in. The small peace she felt, no thunder, no light, as only a gentle stillness in her heart. Years later, looking back, she said, I did not know it was God's will until I looked back and saw that he had been there in every small step. I smiled because that was my story too. We often want to see the hand of God before believing in him, but God wants us to believe first. Then we want assurance before stepping, but he wants our steps to be the evidence of faith. Sometimes walking by faith is not about doing great things, but doing the smallest thing with faithfulness, praying one more time though tired, forgiving one more person though hurt, believing one more day though no miracle has come. Every small step is a voice to heaven saying, We still believe. And when we keep walking, even in doubt, even in fear, God turns those steps into miracles. I have learned that faith is not being without fear. It is walking even while afraid. It is not being certain. It is choosing to trust when nothing is certain. It is not seeing the light. It is daring to step into the night, believing He is there. And when I look back, I see clearly God did not just lead me to a place. He led me to become a person. The path did not only bring me to a destination, it transformed me with every step. And now I no longer ask Him to show me the future. I only ask Him to teach me to walk steadily in the present. For I have come to understand the miracle is not at the destination. It is in every step taken with Him. There were long nights when I sat alone, watching the small oil lamp flicker like the breath of a soul. In that fragile light, I thought of the times I had prayed and seen nothing happen. The times I had offered God all my sincerity and received only silence in return. That silence was not loud, but it was heavy as stone. It made me wonder if He had left, or if I had never truly drawn near to Him. I used to fear that silence, because in it there was no comfort, no sign, no miracle. But when I look deeper, I realize that it is in silence that God works the most. He does not need to speak to create life. Just as the seed sprouts in the soil without a sound, I came to see that sometimes heaven does not answer, not because He forgets, but because He is preparing something I am not yet ready to carry. I thought of Joseph, who once dreamed of glory but was sold into slavery, falsely accused and imprisoned within those cold walls. There were no angels, no thunder, only silence. Yet it was within that silence that a man was forged, a soul was refined, so that when the door opened, he was strong enough not only to rule, but to forgive. I understood that God does not only prepare the path for me, He prepares me for the path, and that process often wears the face of silence. Perhaps the hardest part of faith is not walking when you see the way, but continuing when you hear nothing. I've had nights when I begged God to speak, and all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat. I was angry, doubtful, ready to give up, because I mistook silence for rejection. But now I know silence is the test of love. He is not silent to harm me. He is silent to teach me to trust what I already heard before. For if faith only exists when there is a voice, then it is not faith. It is reaction. True faith begins when God is silent. I have learned to sit in that silence without trying to escape. I have learned to stop searching for signs, to stop asking why, and to simply say, I am still here. I do not know when He will speak, but I know He is still listening. I do not know when the winter will end, but I know the roots are still growing beneath the ground. Everything I see may appear dead, but in that darkness, God is creating life that my eyes cannot yet see. I remember a woman once came to me with tears on her face. She said she had prayed for 5 years for a miracle, yet nothing had happened. She asked me, why is God so silent with me? I did not answer right away. I simply asked, in those 5 years, have you changed? She paused, silent for a while, then softly said, yes, I am more peaceful, less afraid, and I have learned to love more. I smiled. Then God has not been silent. He has just been speaking in a different way. I realized that sometimes we demand God to answer with words, but He answers with transformation. He does not say you will be fine. He makes you strong enough not to need to hear it. Perhaps God does not change the situation because He is using the situation to change us. His silence is not absence. It is the deepest whisper beyond language. I think of Jesus, who lived 30 years in silence before beginning His mission. No miracles, not sermons, only labor, prayer, and waiting. If even the Son of God had to live in silence to be prepared, who are we to ask for another path? Silence is not the sign of distance. It is the school of faith. It teaches me that true value is not found in noise, but in the endurance of stillness. When I sit in the night with no words left to say, I feel my heart becoming transparent. I begin to hear the smallest things. The wind at the door, the beating of my heart, the sigh of my soul. And within them, I hear his voice, soft as mist. God does not speak much, but when he does, everything within me stops. I have learned to treasure his slowness. He is never in a hurry like man. He knows exactly when to speak and when to be silent, because sometimes his silence is the very answer I need. I have stopped asking God to break the silence, and instead I ask to hear him within it. And in the moment I stopped demanding, he began to speak, not in words, but in peace, not in miracles, but in presence. I realized that what I was seeking was never his words, but himself. When the soul reaches that point, silence is no longer frightening. It becomes sacred, for it is within the silence that we find what no sound can bring, the union between the soul and the Creator. One morning, before the dawn had fully chased away the mist, I sat by the window and realized something simple yet profound, that faith is not only about waiting, it is about learning to walk, even when you cannot see. I had gone through many seasons of prayer and waiting, many nights of bowing my head in tears and whispering, Lord, I will go if you show me the way. But his answer never came as a map. It came as a whisper, keep walking, and I will show you the way. When I heard that, I was afraid. To walk without a destination is one of the most vulnerable things a person can do. I was used to control, used to knowing, used to the safety of plans, but God does not lead through plans. He leads through closeness, and that closeness can only be found when I accept to move forward with nothing in my hands but faith. I remember when I was younger, I thought faith meant strength without fear, walking through storms with a smile. But now I understand that faith is not the absence of fear. It is walking while fear is still present. I no longer believe that courage means not trembling, but trembling and moving. Anyway, once I asked God, if I take the wrong step, will you correct me? And he answered in my heart, keep walking, for I cannot lead one who stands still. That day I understood that mistakes are not as dangerous as stagnation. For when I remain still, I may not be wrong, but I am not growing. And God did not create me to stay still. He created me to move in obedience. Someone once said that God only guides the humble. I used to think that meant being weak. But now I know that humility means knowing you do not know everything and still daring to go forward. I have seen many people pray for guidance, but when God points toward the direction their heart resists, they turn away. They pray for light. But when that light reveals the shadows within their soul, they cover their eyes. And I was once the same. I prayed for God to lead, but inside I had already drawn my own map. I said, your will be done, while thinking, as long as it matches mine. That is why my journey was filled with circles, with detours that I thought were coincidences, but were really lessons repeated. God never pushed me forward. He only waited for me to be willing to move. Once I watched the potter shaping clay. He held the soft clay in his hands, turning it, pressing, pulling, and then pressing again. From shapelessness came the form of a vessel. I asked him, what if the clay refuses to turn? He smiled and said, then I will begin again. But it will take longer. As I walked away, his words stayed with me. I realized I was that clay. When I refuse to turn, God still loves me. But he has to begin again. And the journey becomes longer, harder, but also truer. There were seasons I thought God was punishing me, but he was really reshaping me. There were times I thought he'd abandoned me, but he was preparing me to hold what he was about to give. I think of the people in Scripture. I once admired Noah building an ark for years before seeing rain. Abraham leaving home without knowing the destination. Moses leading his people through the desert without seeing the promised land. They were not people with perfect plans. They were people with perfect trust. They did not know, yet they went. And as they went, the miracles happened. Looking back, I see that every major turning point in my life came from moments when I knew nothing. Yet still obeyed. God does not need me to be perfect. He needs me to be willing. He does not ask me to be strong. He asks me to be honest. When I am weak, he is strength. When I am lost, he is the light. When I am wandering, he is the way. Faith is not a moment of courage. It is the endurance built through countless small trials. To walk when uncertain, to pray when there is no result, to forgive when there is no apology, to believe when there is no evidence. Each act is a declaration that God is still leading. I have learned that if I only believe when things are easy, that is not faith. That is agreement. But when I believe in the darkest nights, that is surrender. God does not lead me with loud commands. He leads with a quiet breath of peace. That peace does not remove fear. It rises above it. And when I learned to walk with him through small steps, I began to see life in every detail, from the light through the window to the silence of morning. Everything became meaningful because I knew who was leading me. I do not need to know how long the road is. I only need to know that he will not leave me. And if I must choose between the easy road without God and the rough one with him, I will choose the second, because faith is not about reaching the destination. It is about walking with the right one. There came a season in my life when I began to realize that God does not only lead me through smooth paths, he also deliberately takes me through narrow turns, through roads no one chooses, where every light seems to fade and every certainty disappears. I once believed that walking with God meant being protected from suffering. But then I understood he never promised to keep me from the storm. He promised to be with me in it. And it was in the storm that I discovered what faith truly is. Once I prayed for him to remove a trial I thought I could not bear. But instead of rescuing me, he kept me in the midst of it, not to punish me, but to teach me a lesson that only pain could teach. When a person has nothing left to hold on to, that is when they truly learn to kneel. When I lost what I once thought was essential, I discovered that the only thing I truly needed was him. I once asked God why he allows people to endure things that seem beyond their strength. And the answer I received was not an explanation, but a presence in the darkness. I did not hear a reason, but I felt a hand still holding mine. He did not say, "I will take away your pain." He said, "I will give your pain," meaning, and that changed everything. Some wounds are not meant to destroy, but to open. Some losses are not meant to take away, but to purify. I once thought faith would make me strong, but instead, it made me real. It stripped away the layers of false confidence, the illusion of control, and left me standing bare before God. Through sleepless nights, I learned that God is not looking for the perfect. He is looking for the willing. He does not need me to prove anything. He just wants me to be honest about my fears, my doubts, and the tears no one sees. For it is in weakness that his strength is made perfect. I remember the words of Paul, that his power is made perfect in my weakness. And now I understand it is not when I stand firm that God appears. It is when I fall that he finds a place to enter Someone once asked me how I could still believe after seeing so much cruelty, after so many unanswered prayers, after justice seemed silent. I said, I believe not because I understand, but because I have been to the place where nothing remained, and there I still felt loved. Faith is not born from comfort. It is born from surviving darkness. True faith is not proven by answers, but by the ability to keep believing when there are none. I realize that God does not break us to destroy us. He breaks us to rebuild us. And what is rebuilt by his hands is never the same. It is stronger, humbler, and more grateful. I have seen people transformed not by miracles, but by pain. The mother who lost her child now comforts others who grieve. The one broken by marriage now guides the hopeless. The one who once doubted God now bears living witness to his mercy. God wastes no pain. He turns every wound into testimony, every ruin into a new foundation. I once asked him to remove the burden, but he gave me stronger shoulders. I once asked him to change my situation, but he changed my heart. And when my heart changed, I realized the situation no longer had power over me as before. Suffering was no longer an enemy. It became a teacher. Each time I face a new pain, I know God is calling me deeper into his grace, not to suffer more, but to understand more deeply that even in pain, he is good. Perhaps that is the hardest truth in faith, that God is still good even when life is not. But I have lived long enough to know that nothing is ever lost in his hands. Even what seems meaningless, he uses to create beauty. When I look back on my life, I see that the seasons I thought were failures became the foundation of blessing. The tears I once begged him to wipe away became seeds of compassion. I no longer pray for God to change the path. I pray for him to teach me to walk it with a soft heart. For I have learned that the goal of faith is not to avoid suffering, but to be transformed through it. And I have learned that when the soul is humble enough to say, Lord, I do not understand, but I still believe, that is the moment we stand closest to heaven. For where answers fade and only faith remains, the human heart becomes truest, and God becomes most visible. And I know even if the storm continues, I am no longer afraid, for he is not waiting at the end of the road. He is in every wind that passes through me. One afternoon, as I watched the last light of day fall upon the old rooftops, I suddenly understood that God does not only ask me to trust him in the storms, but also in the quiet seasons when nothing special seems to happen. That is the true test of faith. Not when I face suffering, but when everything feels ordinary. When there are no miracles, no prophecies, no visible signs to cling to, only the repetition of days that look the same. In that stillness, I realize that faithfulness is not proven by grand moments, but by the honesty of living each small day without taking my eyes off him. I once thought following God meant a series of glorious victories, answered prayers, and meaningful turning points. But then I saw that the true journey of the soul is learning to find God in the ordinary, and the steady rhythm of breathing, in the daily work, in the simple meal, in mornings that hold nothing new. God is not only the God of miracles, he is the God of constancy. He is present in the quiet details we often overlook. When I learned that, I began to understand obedience. True obedience is not saying yes in moments of inspiration, but continuing to say yes when the emotion has faded. When the motivation is gone, when faith is no longer a flame but only quiet embers within. A teacher once told me, when you no longer hear his voice, keep doing the last thing he told you to do. That sentence carried me through many barren seasons, because I understood that God's silence is not a sign of redirection, but an invitation to go deeper into faithfulness, like a farmer who sows his seeds and waits for days, seeing nothing. yet still believes that beneath the soil something is taking place. Faith is the same. It is not the excitement of miracles, but the endurance of patience. I used to be impatient, wanting everything to happen faster, thinking delay was failure. But God does not work in human timing. He works in the rhythm of growth, and growth is never hurried. I remember the words in Ecclesiastes, there is a time for everything. God is never late. He simply arrives when we are mature enough to receive what he gives. I have come to understand that if I have not yet seen what I prayed for, perhaps it is not because he has not worked, but because he is doing something greater within me. He does not only want to give me blessings, he wants to teach me how to live worthy of them. There was a long season when I worked in weariness and saw no results. Each day felt the same praying, striving, waiting. I thought I had been forgotten, but when I look back, I saw that it was precisely in those seemingly meaningless days that my soul was strengthened. I learned to work without being seen, to love without being returned, to believe without evidence. I learned that the true value of faith is not found in the outcome, but in the attitude when there is none. For God does not measure my faith by what I receive, but by what I choose to do before receiving anything. In those years, I realized that patience is not passive waiting. It is continuing to walk when there is nothing to encourage you. It is the action of trust, not the endurance of despair. I have seen people give up because they thought silence meant failure. But in truth, silence is where God tests whether we will remain when nothing holds us there, when we stay faithful in days without praise, without notice, without recognition. That is when the soul becomes steel. Once I asked a pastor who had served for more than 40 years, what is the hardest part of walking with God for so long? He smiled and said, it is not enduring suffering. It is not losing wonder. His answer stayed with me, because truly, as the journey grows long, we easily forget that grace is still new every morning. We easily turn relationship into routine, love into a habit, and I told myself, I must learn again to be amazed. Like a child seeing the sunrise for the first time, I began to thank God for the smallest things, for breath, for light, for another chance to begin again. For I realized that those who are grateful for the small will not lose faith in the great. I also came to see that God does not only test me in suffering, he tests me in ease, because sometimes the greatest danger to the soul is not failure, but success. When we receive everything we once prayed for, it becomes easy to forget the one who gave it. I have seen many drift from God, not because of pain, but because of comfort. And I pray that he never allows me to have more than my heart can hold rightly. I do not want success that costs my humility, nor heights that cost his presence. For in the end, faith is not measured by what we achieve, but by whether we still keep a tender heart amid all we have achieved. I have come to understand that living by faith is not living in the extraordinary, but living fully in the ordinary. It is not always feeling God's nearness, but choosing to remain faithful when the feeling is gone. It is not waiting for miracles, but living as if life itself is a miracle happening in every breath. And as I looked out the window and watched the sun sink, my heart was at peace. For I knew that even though nothing special happened today, God was still here, still leading, still teaching me to love more faithfully, to walk more humbly, and to live more gratefully. There are days when I look back over the years and ask myself how many times God said no. And I mistook it for abandonment. I once prayed for him to open a door. I believed I needed to walk through, but he closed it tightly. In that moment, I was in pain, unable to understand why God would withhold what I thought was good. I argued, I cried, I pleaded, But as time passed, I realized that he had not rejected me. He had protected me from something I was not yet ready to receive. God's no is not a period. It is a comma in a story still being written. I remember once praying for a job I thought was the opportunity of my life. Everything about it seemed right, and I was certain I deserved it. But that door shut suddenly. I was so disappointed I did not want to pray anymore. Then a few months later, the company went bankrupt and many lost their jobs. When I heard the news, I sat in silence for hours, not because I was glad, but because I was humbled. I had forgotten that God does not see as we see. While I see one chapter, he sees the entire book. From that moment, I understood that not everything I want is what I need. God never promised to give me everything I asked for, but he promised to give what is best for my soul. And sometimes what is best comes in the form of loss. There was another time I prayed for a relationship I believed was meant to be. I loved with all my heart and prayed each night that God would bind our souls together. But that person left. He fell apart, blaming God, thinking he had taken away my only happiness. Many years later, when I met that person again under different circumstances, I realized that if we had stayed together, neither of us would have become who we are now. I finally saw that God had not taken away what I loved. He had returned me to myself. He cuts not out of anger, but out of love, like a gardener pruning the branches, not to harm the tree, but to make it bear more fruit. Faith is not proven in the yes, but in the ability to accept the no with gratitude. I realized that what makes people suffer most is not what they lose, but how tightly they hold on to it. I had clung to dreams, relationships, and plans as if they defined me. But God taught me that I am not what I do, not who I love, not what I accomplish. I am a beloved child, even when my hands hold nothing. When I accepted that, I found freedom. Freedom does not come from having everything you want, but from no longer being bound by anything. There were nights I sat alone, looking at the quiet sky and whispering, Lord, I do not understand, but I still believe. And in the depths of my heart, I felt a peace that reason could not explain, because faith is not negotiation, it is surrender. Surrender not from weakness, but from trust that he knows what I do not. God is not the one who signs my dreams. He is the one who rewrites them. And he can only write when I release the pen. Someone once asked me how to tell the difference between God's will and my own. I said, when it makes you humbler, kinder, and more forgiving, it is his will. But if it makes you fearful, proud, or attached to something other than him, it is your own. It took me years to learn that simple truth, for I had long confused joy with peace. Joy can come from getting what you want, but peace only comes from accepting what God wants. And between the two, I choose peace, because peace does not depend on outcome. It lives in trust. I once read in Jeremiah, for I know the plans I have for you, plans for peace and not for harm, to give you a future and a hope. I had read that verse many times, but only after walking through closed doors did I understand it. Peace does not come from knowing the plan, but from knowing the one who made it. God never promised an easy path, but he promised never to leave me on it. And now, whenever a door closes, I am no longer afraid. I simply ask, Lord, what do you want me to learn here? Because I know that in everything he does, even in silence, there is purpose. He never does anything without meaning. Every loss, when placed in his hands, becomes the seed of something new. I may not see the flowers yet, but I believe that beneath the soil, God is still at work. I have learned that sometimes the most powerful prayer is not, give me, but take away what is not mine. And every time I dare to say those words, I feel a strange freedom within me. For when there is nothing left to lose, I finally possess myself And when only God remains, I realize He has always been enough. When the journey began to reach its final days, I realized that the strangest thing about faith is not found in visible miracles, but in the ability to still believe when there is nothing left to hold on to. I have walked through many seasons of life, seasons of blossoming, of drought, of harvest, and of abandonment. Each season carried its own voice, and each voice taught me something about the nature of God. In joy, I learned gratitude. In suffering, I learned surrender. In silence, I learned to listen. But only when everything seemed to fall apart did I learn the deepest truth, that faith is not a feeling, it is a choice. The choice to believe though the heart trembles, the choice to stand though the knees are weak, the choice to sing though the lips are still wet with tears. One evening, as I knelt in my small room, I no longer asked for anything. I had no words left, no strength to reason. I only whispered one sentence, Lord, I still believe in you. That sentence did not echo. There was no thunder, no miracle. Yet in the stillness I felt a presence overflow, not a presence that made everything disappear, but one that gave meaning to everything that remained. Then I understood God does not come to remove the burden, He comes to carry it with me. He does not promise to make the road easy. He promises to make my heart strong. I began to understand why Jesus chose the cross instead of the throne, because He knew that true glory does not come from avoiding suffering, but from walking through it with love. And in my own journey, He taught me the same. Every scar is no longer a mark of failure, but a witness of love that endured. Every fall is no longer shame, but a reminder that I am still fighting. Faith does not keep me out of the darkness. It helps me see light within it. I realize that those who are mature in faith are not the ones with many answers, but the ones who can stand firm in the spaces where there are none. I used to fear uncertainty, fear losing direction, or fear the fog of the future. But then I understood that it is within that uncertainty that God works most. If I knew everything, I would not need to trust. If I controlled everything, I would not need to surrender. It is the unknown that makes faith real, because I must walk seeing nothing but His hand. Now I no longer ask God to remove the trial. I ask Him to give me eyes to see Him within it. I no longer ask Him to clear the path. I ask Him to teach me to walk the uncleared one. I no longer ask why. I ask, who are you shaping me to become through this? And when I changed the question, everything within me changed. I understood that life is not a sequence of things to be explained, but a journey of trust to be lived. God does not create the path for me to understand Him. He uses the path for me to know Him. And I know He has never left. Even in my doubt, my anger, my running away, He was still walking behind me, waiting for me to turn back. That is a love that never tires, a love without condition, a love that exists even without being returned. I once tried to please Him through perfection, but now I understand that what He wants is not a perfect soul, but an honest one, a soul that dares to admit its weakness and still chooses to believe. For God is not glorified through my strength, He is glorified through my surrender. Someone once said that true faith does not begin when you say, I believe in God. But when you still believe, though, there is no reason left to believe. I have lived that truth. And when I lifted my head after years of trial, I did not see a stronger person. I saw a quieter soul, a soul at peace, not because everything is good, but because I belong to the one who never changes. The world may change, people may betray, but He remains unregretting, unmoving, unending in love. Everything else may be taken away, but no one can take Him from me. And if there is one final lesson this journey has taught me, it is this: Faith is not finding God at the end of the road. It is realizing He has walked with you through every step. I understand now. Life is not a series of gains, but of releases, releasing my will to find His, releasing fear to hold peace, releasing self to keep love. When I learned that I no longer needed to know what the future holds, because I know who holds it. I no longer need to know where the road leads, because I know who walks with me. And now, as I look back, I have only one thing left to say. Everything that once broke me, that once made me fall, that once made me doubt, was the very thing God used to draw me closer to Him. I do not know what awaits ahead, but I know who awaits me. And that alone is enough for a lifetime. Now that the journey has come to its close, I sit at the fragile border between light and shadow, listening to the rhythm of my heart blend with the stillness of the universe. I understand now that everything I have been through, every pain, every fall, every silent night, was never meaningless. They were the stones God laid beneath my feet so that I would not collapse. I once prayed for a smooth path, but now I know it was the winding roads that made my soul grow. I once feared the darkness, but now I know that only in the night can the true light be seen. Faith does not make life easier, but it makes us stronger to live it fully. I have learned that peace is not when the wind stops blowing, but when the heart no longer fears the wind. Faith is not the absence of doubt. It is the choice to walk, even when doubt remains. The love of God is not the promise to keep me from breaking. It is His presence in every broken piece, turning them into light. And because of that, I understand that this journey is not only my story, but the story of all of us, souls finding our way back to ourselves, back to the light that has always been within. If today you are weary, if you are in a dry season of faith, if you feel like God is silent, I want to tell you this. He is still there. He is still working in the silence, still preparing the best for you, even if you do not yet see it. Do not let go. Do not lose hope, for what you are going through is not the end, but the beginning of something new. Keep walking, even if it is only one small step. Believe that the light is still ahead, even when you cannot yet see it. Let your faith rest not in what you understand, but in the one you trust. And one day, when you look back, you will see that every sorrow you carried has been used by God to write a story far more beautiful than what you once prayed for. I want to thank you, the one who has walked with me until this point, who has listened, reflected, and opened your heart. Every time you are here, every time you share, every time you let these words touch your heart, you are not only hearing the story, you are reliving the journey of your own soul. And that, to me, is the greatest gift anyone who speaks or creates could receive. I hope these words bring you peace, so that wherever you are, you will know you are not alone. We are all learning together how to believe, how to love, how to rise, how to keep walking when we can no longer see the way. And in every step, God is still smiling. I pray that His grace touches you, your family, and those you love. Keep the lamp within you burning. No matter how strong the wind may blow, keep believing. No matter how many times the world gives you reasons to doubt. And remember, He never leaves you. He never stops loving you. He never stays silent forever. May peace fill your soul. And may the word of God you have heard today walk beside you in every step ahead. I pray that you find light in silence, a strength in faith, and rest in His presence. May your home be filled with peace, your heart with courage, and your spirit with the quiet confidence that you are never alone. When you close this video, remember one thing. God is still with you in every moment, in every breath, until we meet again. Stay strong, stay gentle, and stay close to His grace.